right, gang, we'll get started here in 2-3 minutes. Hope things are going well with you. I got a very warm cat inside of my hoodie here today, so I'm not actually like 50 weeks pregnant. We're all just trying to make it through this cold weather. Hope things are good. Today we're talking about technology and glass here in a sec, so go ahead and settle in wherever you're at, and we'll get started here in a sec.
Hello.
Morning.
Morning.
Got about 1 minute to go before we get started, Raul. So go ahead and settle in. We'll get rolling.
All right.
All right, it is straight away to the top of the hour by my clock here. So let's go ahead and get started. Just as just kind of a reminder, since it's been a minute since we met last. We had an ice storm a week ago. Then we had a bunch of snow earlier, and it's nuts. So we are luckily doing a lot better, thanks to our level of preparedness and technology here in Southern Illinois than folks in Texas are doing. So if you have any family down there, they are genuinely struggling right now, having to throw out a bunch of COVID vaccines and a bunch of people's houses getting destroyed in 0-degree weather, pipes bursting and stuff like that, because they're not really ready for it. Their houses were built to a code. Their electrical grid was built to a code determined decades ago, before the current status of climate change had led to the possibility of things like polar vortexes getting unstable and spilling all the way down to Texas and Louisiana and places like that. So they're getting a once in a generation ice storm, but it's going to be more than once in a generation coming up. So, this is the kind of stuff that we as foresters get to kind of wrestle with, as we are environmental professionals and charged very commonly with taking care of lands that are adapted to a certain kind of climate, in the same way that Texas housing codes and electrical grids are adapted to one kind of a climate. But we are changing that climate with largely our technologies. So let's talk today about technologies as kind of our entry point into talking about current status, situations, trends, near future trends, stuff like that with respect to forest and outdoor rec management. For those of us thinking about becoming a park ranger or conservation police or, wildlife technician, anything like that, a huge chunk of what we're spending our effort on out in the field, interfacing with people, like visitors, hunters, fishermen, stuff like that. A huge chunk of our effort is going to be kind of mediated by the technology that we have to help serve the public and to take care of forest stands and wildlife habitat and game species and all of that stuff, as well as the technology that these recreationists have. So today we're going to have hopefully a halfway interesting kind of romp through just a bunch of, to me, it's mostly interesting and entertaining to look through kind of cool new technologies and then also see how people just go completely gonzo with it and crank it up to 11 in just various bizarre ways. And sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes it ends in somebody getting literally physically splattered on the side of a mountain. And that's kind of one of the risks we take with new technologies in forest
Like
and
big
outdoor rec.
or
Question, Raul?
yeah, so like when you mean like new technology or big technology, is it like having cars try and go through rivers with big tires, or like just trying to make new equipment to like climb walls, like ATVs or stuff like that?
Yeah, literally all of those and a whole bunch else. So let's get right into it. Enough of this preamble stuff. So speaking of cars with big old balloon tires and that sort of thing, let's see. Let's pull some of this stuff up. I'll screen share it over to you. And oh, there she goes. Say bye-bye, Paige. All right. You can, in the same way that the Titanic was made of iron, but was certainly capable of sinking, we can make iron or steel, an iron alloy vehicle do things that you wouldn't normally ascribe to metal objects. So for example, we got this right here. So we have a couple of different kinds of tires that are relevant to our discussion today. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration wing, the Department of Defense that does just like crazy moonshot research projects to see what kind of new technologies we can use to be better warfighters here in the United States. They're developing things like flatless tires, which is kind of this technological advancement beyond run flat tires, which if they get punctured, they don't go completely flat and leave the vehicle stranded, or the Mars probe stranded, for example. They don't use inflatable tires on those specifically for that reason, because nobody out there to change a tire on Mars. That they'll admit to. All right, so this is just a car with big old aftermarket tires mounted on an external frame. You can see the bars underneath the frame of the vehicle, and it's got basically a heavy duty ski or sledge up front, kind of shaped like a snowshoe. So what that does is the size of the tires and the low inflation pressure means that the tire sort of squishes flat to the ground and widens out the so-called contact patch, which lowers the amount of pressure per square inch. So pounds per square inch, or kilograms per square meter if you're in the imperial or the metric system. And when you get that low enough, you start skating or skiing or sliding over top of the snow in this case, or water, for water skis, instead of incising or slicing down into it. Now, for forest and outdoor recreation purposes, this is actually a pretty useful thing. So up in the northern United States, up in Canada, up in Scandinavia, in the winters when they get a lot of their forestry and logging timber extraction done, because if you look at this snow not from a rec perspective, but like an ecological sheath or cladding or even armor perspective, it's just inches or feet or meters of snow in some places that um, acts as an offset, acts as an extra layer of clothing, so to speak, for the soil, so that those tires, when they lose traction and start spinning and throwing up big rooster tails of snow, they're not throwing up big rooster tails of soil or dirt in this case, which is just soil out of place. So if you want to think of it this way, snow is like natural armor for the forest ecosystems that we're talking about doing this stuff in. And this matters not because some random person with, a home arc welding kit and a bunch of engineering expertise or chops, throws a pair of balloon snow tires and an industrial front ski onto a jalopy car and goes driving around in the snow. That's not a big deal. Like, one person's not gonna wreck an entire ecosystem, right, by driving over it in the snow. But when you think about how high our standard for technology is in the United States, how huge and deeply ingrained and historically embedded our passion for forest and outdoor recreation is in the United States. I mean, we're talking, the population of the United States is something like 330 million people, just kind of depending on how you count it. Citizens versus non-citizen residents and all that stuff. Multiply that desire to do something fun outdoors, like driving around in your vehicle, but like just skating over the snow, ramping off little hills and stuff. Like, that's a lot of fun. But that works out to over 1 billion visitor days just in American federal land management recreation places like parks and forests, wildlife refuges, and our wilderness areas. We can handle any particular ecosystem can probably handle a single car rolling around like this. Can it handle 1 billion days per year of stuff like this? Maybe, maybe not. Like, in some cases, we've kind of hammered our parks and our forests to death by enjoying them, by loving them. The phrase we use in park management is, can you love a park to death? And the answer is absolutely yes, if left unchecked. So part of our conversation about technology today is to kind of celebrate human ingenuity. Like, if there's any possible way, like Raul was talking earlier about a new way to scale a cliff face, either by hand, rock climbing, or in an ATV by taking the tires off and welding 18-inch rebar spikes radially out like spokes, and having those sort of bite into the rock and you can climb up a vertical cliff that way. Somebody will have tried it. And for those that survive the attempt and it actually kind of halfway works, it's going to spread, and the question is it okay if that spreads to 1 billion visit days? Around the world globally, we've got something a little bit more than about 1 billion internal combustion engines. And when you think about how not everybody, this is not a universal thing, of course, but some other folks in some other countries they aspire to have an American standard of living for things like outdoor recreation. They want to be able to have access to national forests and parks and cars with huge 5-foot radius or 5-foot diameter snow tires and skis mounted on them and stuff like that. Like, it's fun, and they have a legitimate desire to do some of those fun things just like we do, and so forth. So the issue becomes, is this a sustainable technology, both respect to, could we convert 1 billion cars to do something like this or not? And could our planet's ecosystems handle 1 billion vehicles getting converted in this way? So let me give you another example with motorized wreck here. This one might be a little bit more general use than something equipped for snow use. So I believe this video is out of Russia, if I recall. And clearly it works. Like I don't care who you are. That looks like a lot of fun.
You're
Mounting
slowing down.
legit. Oh no,
You're
my
back.
home internet
Yay.
connection is screwed. All right. I'm glad nobody left that I know of. Okay, let's get back to watching tanks that people made in their garages. Okay, so the basic idea here is I don't care who you are. That looks like fun, and if I could afford it, or if I had like a garage to do something like this, I would absolutely be doing this. I've 3D printed some very small custom tanks and stuff like that, and installed little toy motors on them, and that's fun. I can only imagine how much more fun it is to have an actual full-size tank, and so forth. So the idea here is, yeah, this is the real thing. What does this do to the forest ecosystem involved? So if you look at the center of the road in the foreground here, we've got, you can see where the tank treads have kind of torn up the ground just a little bit on a hardened surface that is meant to be driven on. How much more would it tear up open, soft floor? The answer is quite a bit, especially when turning. Tank treads absolutely shred the substrate they're on top of, on surface they're on top of, and they are all right. So there's that. No further distraction. Let's see here. All right. So anybody, let me kind of out to the experience chop chop modding like this. Do you have any sense of what it takes to do like this? Maybe your family is super into four-wheeling or off-roading. You do anything kind of like this? Couple, maybe. This year class is a little bit smaller, so maybe not. We'll see. But anybody ever do any off kind of less with tanks?
While working at Cantini Park up in Wheaton last summer, I actually got to, the only experience I got with the tank was someone dropped, the tank maintenance crew dropped a one of their tools within the treads of one of the World War II Shermans that they have in their tank museum. And so
Ooh.
me being
Uh-huh.
skinny enough still to get my arms back there, I got to reach in and get it out of the Sherman. That was pretty cool. But that's the
Good
only
Lord.
experience I've.
Hopefully they locked out the transmission before you stuck your arm in there.
Oh yeah, I wasn't running. It was fine.
Golly. All right. Okay, that's good. So that's pretty sick. Tanks have incredibly complex suspensions and drivetrains. It's not the right solution for a lot of things, but for softer ground where you can afford to tear up the ground a little bit, they are amazing. They'll go anywhere because, again, the entire tread surface on the bottom side functions as the contact patch, lowering the ground pressure. So it's the whole point of tank treads is that it's harder for them to bog down in like soft, muddy, muck soil when they have to cross that, in a warfighting capacity or just having fun and so forth. So this is a non-trivial thing for us. We have some pretty good options for getting some of this stuff going. All right, let's check out some others. So here's another example. It's not a video, but I think you'll get the sense of it pretty quickly here. We're talking for the moment about motorized forms of recreation, and I think this one is going to be pretty recognizable. So this is called mudding. You got a high clearance Jeep in this case, and looks like maybe a Cherokee behind it. You can see that this is a custom modified suspension, and it's got a wider stance. So that helps it to not roll over sideways on high angle sideways traverses. If we weren't in a muddy substrate, in a sort of woodland environment, crawling. So out west, where we have a lot of rock formations kind of shaped like, that's called rock crawling. And this is super duper fun. For those of you going on summer camp this summer, be at some place where, on one of our 0 days, for example, if you want to, you can rent a Jeep and go do something like this. And there's a bazillion different examples of rock crawling worth looking at. So here's another one of those. Let's see. So this is usually fairly low speed. You can see there's somebody outside the vehicle coaching the person inside. And this is purely for the fun of it. Like, you can walk from the bottom of this traverse to the top faster than you can drive it in this Jeep. But it's just a question of, okay, so could we even do this? Is this even possibly a thing? And yeah, the answer is obviously yes. Like, there are in the same way that there are like music festivals and Sturgis up in the Dakotas every year has a huge road motorcycle gathering of over 100,000 people. There are gatherings for rock crawling, festivals for rock crawling Jeeps, just kind of all over the place all the time. It's super fun.
Do those
So it's
rocks get start to break eventually, or like, because I feel like after a while those same rocks are going to start crumbling, or they're going to start to wear out, especially with the excess weight of the Jeeps constantly crawling on them.
Potentially, yeah, in some places. So in areas where the rock crawling is happening on like a granite substrate, granites are typically very hard, well consolidated, meaning the joins between the individual crystals of quartz and feldspars and mica and schist and all that stuff that comprise the grains of the granite. When those are well consolidated, when they're well sort of stuck together, you can kind of beat on that all day long. It's not really going to do anything. In other places where it's poorly consolidated, like parts of Yosemite Valley, some of those granite walls are sloughing off into what's called decomposed granite, which is basically just sand with very large crystals that might be 2 or 3 millimeters in diameter instead of a 1/10 of a millimeter in diameter, like a typical grain of sand might be. So in that particular place where you got decomposed granite, you could not drive a Jeep over at one time without causing permanent, like geological timescale damage to the site, to the ecosystem. So as with many things, the answer is it depends. And another part of our conversation for today is just what can we afford in terms of damage? Because if you are going to be a park ranger with a park service, your job is explicitly to preserve the site so that it is exactly the same or in better condition at the end of your career, at the end of your lifetime for the next generations. And 500 generations from now, assuming America lasts that long, hopefully we do, as when you received it at the start of your career. So that's a preservation orientation or mandate or mission for the Park Service. At the same time, the Park Service has an equal weight mission to provide high quality, like world-class quality opportunities to do forest and outdoor recreation, including motorized rec. And so, part of the balance of being a forester in that particular role as a park ranger or park superintendent, park planner, wildlife habitat conservation person, is to try and strike that balance. How do we absolutely protect this place and provide for recreation? And the answer in the case of stuff like rock crawling, Raul, is typically to find those spots which are almost perfectly resistant to impacts, like those well-consolidated granite rock crawling areas. Doesn't matter if we drive 1,000 vehicles over that per day, for every day for the rest of humanity's span on Earth. It's gonna be fine. Every once in a while, maybe 1 in a million vehicles is just gonna, explode its crankcase or its transmission case and leak a bunch of petrochemicals all over that rock and poison the local flora and fauna. But maybe if it's only 1 in a million, we can deal with that. We can clean it up. We can keep managing that site intensively with that intensive vehicular use. And it's okay. We measure these things very closely. We track them continuously to make sure that the health of the site is absolutely tip top.
All right.
And
Thank
then,
you.
with the Forest Service and stuff like that, they have a different mandate. It's a conservation mandate where recreation is absolutely a first class reason to use a forest. And we don't have to worry about preserving it, but we do got to make sure that that forest can still provide, X number of board feet of timber on average per year, every year. X thousands of acre feet of clean drinking water in those forest watersheds per year, every year. And in those places, so let me pull up some other examples here. So this is not in a Jeep necessarily, but a four-wheeler, a slightly smaller version of the same kind of technology, open cabin, stuff like that. This is four-wheeling. This is also mudding, but just not in a Jeep. And you can see here that from a purely ecological perspective, the damage to the soil structure here, the damage to the vegetation here in this spot is pretty extreme. The technical term would be extirpation. That is complete destruction of wildlife habitat and vegetation and stuff like that in this spot, which is kind of a downer. But then you look at the rest of the area framed by this image and you see, okay, well, they're still standing live and dead trees in frame. Those are functional habitat and so forth. And maybe for sound sensitive species, having these ATVs roll through on irregular schedules on nice days is an impact. And for other species, it kind of isn't. They just don't really care if you're around. So in a conservation setting, instead of a preservation one like the Park Service has, you have this whole other set of options where you can kind of go ham and, get bogged down in a mud hole like this and then have your buddy hook a tow strap to the front and say, all right, now don't floor it. Just try to ease the throttle in, don't spin your wheels, don't bog down any worse, don't dig down anymore with those big knobby tires, and we'll get you out. And that's half the fun of mudding. Like, half the time you're moving and half the time you're standing around with your hands on your hips and you've like thrown your hat down on the ground in frustration because we're stuck again. But, deep down inside, that's the exciting part. Okay. So no big deal, right? No big deal when stuff like that happens in areas where we can manage that. Now, another aspect of technology that's kind of fun for nerds like me lately is stuff like drones. And here's an image from the park system of British Columbia. So Canadians, they had to make a very difficult decision to say just no drones, period, whatsoever. We know this is a fun recreational thing for a lot of people. This is a new technology. It's newly affordable. You can get a virtual reality headset that's tied to a drone and a real-time 60 frames per second high-def camera for $100 at a truck stop now. Like, this technology is ubiquitous. Following 25 years of intensive drone development, primarily led by the U.S. military, we get a lot of our technology for outdoor rec, kind of directly inherited from money that we spend on our military, about $750 billion per year here in the United States. But as it turns out, the effects of drone technology, even though they are super fun to pilot, drone racing leagues are amazing. It's like a real life video game, flying through these crazy obstacle courses and stuff like that. The problem is, in a wildlife rich setting like a national park or like Shawnee National Forest, or like Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area a couple hours to our east in Murray, Kentucky, where they have elk and bison herds in prairies, so confined in these special paddocks to bring up breeding and stuff like that. The wildlife harassment potential is extreme. So you can, with a single small recreational drone, again, less than $100, you can cause an entire bison herd to stampede, and in their panic, injure their own young. In their panic, have them spending calories in places like Yellowstone, which is a high plateau valley, where they absolutely have to have a minimum number of calories to make it through that winter. The bison in Yellowstone have to contend with 6-foot high snowdrifts as late as the second week of June. It's a high plateau, it's cold, it's snowy, with the precip pattern there. And if they don't have the minimum number of just basal metabolic rate calories they need to survive in 0 to 30 degree weather for 5-6 months at a time, they just die. Like, there's nothing to be done about it. We're not going to put out a bunch of dog food for bison in the middle of a national park. That's not workable. So in some cases, the technology is there, it's awesome, it's recreational, but it's not compatible with the ecological mandate we've got as foresters to keep the other half of the equation, the ecosystems that are keeping us alive, safe and healthy and running as well. Let's pause for a sec for Lauren's question. I got a question. When I was working with YCC, so that's Youth Conservation Corps, a great spot for summer jobs and stuff like that, for those of you thinking about for this summer. Working with YCC for the Forest Service, I asked some of the workers which would tear up a trail more, a horse or a four-wheeler. What is my opinion? Well, I have my opinions, but I also have a whole bunch of research that we've done over the past 20 years, and me personally in the past 10 years, to speak directly to this. So let's talk about it. A horse has a hoof shaped very much like if you took a cylinder and then cut it at a camber or a miter. So cut that hollow tube at an angle that's shaped like a hypodermic needle. And a horse's hoof is shaped in that way to give it purchase. Horses walk in a digitigrade, where on the tips of their fused toe, the hoof. And so all of that pressure of the entire hundreds of pounds of horse, some of the bigger draft horses could be approaching a ton. All of that, when galloping, for example, there's 1 foot in contact with the ground at the time. So the entire force downward of gravity of the horse is on that. It's about a 3 square inch contact patch versus a 3 square foot contact patch for a a big low tire pressure snow tire. So 1 pound per square inch is 144 times the pressure of 1 pound per square foot. And then you add, or in this case, you actually multiply the additional force exerted by the hoof to push and accelerate that horse against gravity up and forward as it's galloping along. So the answer here depends very much on, is the four-wheeler running inflated tires or low pressure deflated tires? Are the four-wheeler's tires knobbies? So they have those bumps and knobs all over them, which bite into softer or more powdered, less consolidated soils. And what is the gait, or what is the walking pattern of the horse? When a horse is walking, it's got one hoof out of 4 off the ground at any time. And then at cantering, I think it's 2 feet off the ground. At galloping, it's 1 foot on the ground or 3 feet off. And so all of those things each impact what's the erosivity, what's the soil impact or the trail impact rate of a horse versus a human foot versus a mountain bike's knobby tires. They have the same potential issues as a four-wheeler versus a four-wheeler versus something bigger and heavier like a Jeep or Humvee outfitted for off-road use. Okay, so the answer is in the specific spot where the horse hoof is contacting the ground and it is galloping and the soil is typically a little bit wet. Maybe you're trail riding after some rain and your horse gets spooked and so it jumps into a gallop. Usually folks aren't galloping on trail riding because that's a lot less safe for a lot of good reasons. Usually trail riding is pretty sedate and chill, but it does happen. In that case, that's second only to when a internal combustion engine vehicle, which has more horsepower than a horse does. Supercars, for example, can have over 2,000 horsepower at certain speeds. Okay, so imagine 2,000 horses trying to turn that knobby tire. In the case that you added knobbies to a supercar, you would never do that, of course. But you get the idea that internal combustion engine vehicles have the capacity, ridden irresponsibly or ridden stupidly, to tear up the soil a heck of a lot faster than a horse can. But in some cases on the Shawnee, like in Lusk Creek Wilderness area, you have these outfitted trail rides where there are 100 horses riding along a section of trail led by a guide, who helps pack everybody's lunches and brings enough feed for the horses along. And it's actually a real pleasant time. In that case, there aren't any four-wheelers on those trails. They're equestrian only trails in those places on the Shawnee. And so we don't have to worry about four-wheelers. We do have to worry about 100 horses all stepping in the same spot, particularly in places like stream crossings where the soil is saturated, it's soft, it's muddy. Any roots running through that area, the horse hoof can sort of slice right through those with that hypodermic shaped hoof. And so, yeah, that can be a thing. So the lowest impact, absolute lowest impact, is going to be a human being in snowshoes on snow. They have functionally absolutely zero impact on the trail or the soil surface underneath. It's awesome. So Nordic skiers, for example, in Scandinavia, we don't really worry about ecological impact studies for recreation for them because we're not doing any harm. So that would look like, instead of, think back to that four-wheeler, which was all stood up because it's got enough torque, enough horsepower to stand itself up despite the mud that's trying to suck it down. Mud has a suction pressure potential of 40 to 80,000 pounds per square inch, which is why when you see a horse getting stuck in the mud, they have to dig it out. They can't just pull it out. That would literally pull the horse apart. You would get the front part of the horse that you've strapped to whatever tractor you're pulling the horse out with, and the back half just gets left behind and you got a dead horse and a super traumatized horseback rider who's probably right there with the horse. So at the very low end, we've got humans on snow, human powered, less than 1 horsepower. At the top end, we've got Humvees and other rock crawler type vehicles that have hundreds, or in a few cases over 1,000 horsepower applied to 1 or 2 wheels if it's up on its edge or high siding, something like that. That can tear up ground very, very quickly. And in a couple places like down in the southeast, down in some of those cypress swamps and stuff like that, just kind of at the northern boundary of Florida, sort of spilling over into Georgia. They've torn up patches, mud bogging. They're so big, they're visible from space, and NASA has literally measured the difference in flow through those swampy areas caused by these furrows, these tracks, these basically drainage ditches cut by each pair of tires, rolling through these swampy areas, and then the water has to flow along that instead of flowing very slowly sideways across it. So super long answer to your question, Lauren. That question is the fundamental single underlying question of my entire area of expertise and research. How do these different kinds of recreation in various kinds of ecosystems that we love and know as Shawnee National Forest or Yosemite National Park or Crab Orchard or wherever, how do those interface to A, provide us a good time, and B, potentially utterly wreck that ecosystem? It's the same kind of basic question, just asking about tires and soil erosion, as hunters in the last 100 years have been confronted with, we want to hunt passenger pigeons, and we are so effective with our gun technology that we can hunt that species literally to extinction to feed growing population centers like Chicago in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And we just eat them all to death, and they're gone now. And then we get, pretty amazing conservation organizations like Ducks Unlimited, quail and pheasant, QDMA, Quality Deer Management. All these different conservation organizations respond to those impacts that we're capable of because our technology is so amazing to try and shore up the other side of the equation. So making sure that we're conserving enough habitat and we are limiting our gun use to certain kinds of guns like black powder on some weekends, bow hunting instead of firearms whatsoever on some weekends, slug guns instead of rifles in some areas for some species on some weekends, that sort of thing. It's all the same thing. It's all the same big question. How do we make sure that folks have legit access to high quality hunting, and how do we make sure that we got anything left for them to hunt next year after this year's high tech, high success rate typically hunts? And so we put all these sort of extra artificial constraints on it, like you got to have this certain kind of permit. You can take as many does as you want, but you only get one buck. You have to go into a huge lottery for hunting bears in most states because there's just not a lot of bears. They're pretty big omnivorous predators, and so there just aren't very many of them to hunt. And taking one has a fairly big effect. An adult male black bear needs by itself about 100 square miles of high quality habitat. So that means you don't get a whole lot of bears throughout Illinois, which is not these days anymore with all of our farmland, super high quality habitat for bears anymore. So Lauren, does that kind of answer your question a little bit? Hopefully that's kind of a big sort of long answer. But the basic sense of it is, which is better or worse, a horse or a four-wheeler? Kind of depends on how you're driving it and the weather conditions. But generally speaking, a internal combustion powered modern vehicle is capable of much more damage than otherwise. So there you go. That was a really good question. What other questions do you guys and gals have? I got like 9-10 minutes left. I'll see if I can't upload some more of these video clips for everybody's enjoyment and images, to our course website, just to check it over the next few days. But what questions do you have as I pull up some more examples for us?
Do you see any like trends that might come in like with cultural shifts? Do you think like any trends will get bigger, like base jumping or wingsuits or stuff like that? Like, do you think those are gonna get even bigger than they are, or is it just like it's more of a wait game to see what's gonna be new and what's gonna be popular?
That's a good question as well. So trends lately are moving towards higher technology. Like this is a video that was posted across the internet just the other day with using a weighted, basically RC vehicle, and just kind of power sledding around a local city park. We're seeing a lot more stuff like this with drones, with lithium batteries getting increasingly high power density, with small electric motors benefiting from humanity's absolute need to transition away from internal combustion engines to electrical vehicles to stop loading our atmospheric blanket with even more carbon over the next sort of 30, 40 years. Like, this looks like a lot of fun, and this is super accessible to anybody. This isn't a particularly expensive thing. It's certainly a lot cheaper than a four-wheeler or a tricked out off-roading Humvee or something like that. And maybe you still get that sort of same visceral sense of, oh man, this is super fun. I'm getting some fresh air. I'm getting some challenge. I'm acquiring some skills. I get to play with my toys. And there's also the social element to it. You see all the people around this guy watching and vicariously participating and also getting to enjoy this. So urban proximate recreation empowered by technology like electric motors, like lithium polymer batteries, because this is totally a target opportunity thing. Like, you could do this on your lunch break on Campus Lake if it froze, you know, safely enough that you could do this, right? No big deal. Like, a couple of minutes to get set up, a couple of minutes to tear down, and the rest of the you're just having a blast around. Versus $500 to $1,000 just to get on site, and then you got to deal with lodging, and you got to deal with the activities and maybe, you know, the equipment to do those activities and stuff like that. So we're seeing a lot more of this. Another thing that we're seeing a lot more of is sort of a bigger and faster progression of people experimenting with combining more technologies. So let me, let's see. Let me share this video. This is a copter that somebody has basically hooked a handgun to, and there it is. All right, so you wire up a linear servo and you get a quadcopter setup that is capable of handling the recoil, and now you've got a recreational armed drone. Now, the laws with something like this are nowhere near being able to capture all of the different possibilities that are fun, even on a recreational basis, for having drones, having handguns, and having enough spare time and energy and headspace to figure out how to wire a gun up to a quadcopter. Like, that looks like a pretty fun weekend to me, you know, as long as you're being safe and all that stuff, and knowing your backstop, and you're doing this in a safe area. But just not so much focusing on the gun or the quadcopter, but the improvisational nature of it. Like, somebody was like, I wonder if I could do this, and so let's see if we can. There's a lot more of that happening now because there's so many new technologies and options available for stuff like that. Let's see if I can find another one. Yeah, here we go. So this also looks like a pretty good time to me. All right, and this is taking that soft snow tire buoyancy over snow, or contact patch area low pressure over snow, to the next level of actual water buoyancy. And yeah, that works. It's not as fast as a motorboat. It will never be as fast as a motorboat. It's not as fast as a car on the road. It will never be with that kind of suspension and those huge wheels. But it's just trying stuff out for outdoor recreation purposes because we can, and so forth. So one positive trend is exactly this. And with the advent of electric vehicles, which have maximum torque at 0 RPMs, typically the lower speed Forest Rec stuff is becoming more and more exciting and cool in this way. So yeah, we have some interesting options getting floated around. I didn't even get to the jetpacks and flamethrowers and all the other stuff because we're kind of running out of time here. Okay, so one sort of brief assignment we're going to have for next week, and I'll put this on our course website and link it and all that stuff, so it's easy to find. But is going to be to identify what's one kind of forest or outdoor recreation that you personally enjoy, and what's one current technological innovation that's kind of changing or even revolutionizing or even just slightly updating an activity that you enjoy. It could be if you are into hunting, the recent advent of stuff like 3D camo patterns, Realtree type stuff, improving a hunter's ability to blend into their environment, or retroreflective, like mirrored hunting blind surfaces, where you don't even have to select the right pattern and the right colorway. It's just a mirror and it reflects what's around it, so it automatically looks like your surroundings, and you sit behind the mirror and you're good to go. Whatever that might be for your particular activity, just as an excuse to enjoy poking around on the web, or even in your phone's own camera roll or whatever, of stuff that you've tried maybe to just play around with, to improvise, to improve the technological approach to your particular kind of recreation. So it'll be to identify what that might be. And then, from the other half of what we as foresters are looking at this forest and outdoor recreation stuff from, is to just in a super short, lightweight, qualitative, like couple sentences kind of way, ask yourself, all right, so if everybody did this new twist on hunting, or monster truck driving like we saw floating in the waterway there, or slapping tank treads on a car like we saw at the beginning of class or whatever, what does that mean in terms of the forest habitats that folks are going to want to be doing this stuff in? Maybe it's pretty low impact, right? Skydiving doesn't harm forest soils whatsoever. But hang gliding, skydiving, parasailing are absolutely terrifying for wildlife species, because they interpret those bright, typically triangle or crescent colored shapes of the parachutes or parasails as predatory species like hawks flying over them. So sometimes it's a little complex, and if somebody's just out there trying to have a good time mudding, they're not necessarily thinking about or concerned with the other species present or the habitat effects present. And so it kind of falls to us as the foresters to help be the mediaries in that, to help folks find good sustainable spots that can handle that off-roading, that four-wheel driving, without a bunch of extra pollution and stuff like that, or tearing up the land for everybody else who might want to enjoy it afterwards. For your kids who might want to enjoy it 25 years from now or whatever, and their great grandchildren who want to enjoy an area without having to deal with furrows and tracks and destroyed ecosystems that we left behind. So yeah, conservation, preservation, it's a lot of different things to kind of pull together in the face of rapid technologies. Okay, so that'll be a short assignment on the course website. It's 10:50.
Oh,
I'm
it'll be
around
on D2L,
for
right?
questions. Yep, yeah, I'll put on D2L, and I'll be around here for a couple minutes for questions. Otherwise, you're free to go. Have a good classes. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Also, can we send you like before we submit it, can we send you like a draft of what we wrote, just to make sure that like I have the right idea of like what we're doing? Because sometimes
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
You can
just
bounce
want to make
around
sure.
ideas with me right now if you want to. Or just send me something and I'll try and get to it before Tuesday.
So for real quick, for like, because I'm thinking of mine like activity is like hiking / walk, just like general nature walking, like trails.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, does like with the what because I've seen like sometimes they started making like VR stuff and like
Yeah.
basic like technology where you can like do trails or like VR trails, and you can just like, as long as you have like one of those stationary things, you could just walk around up the trail, inclining and all that
Yep.
stuff. Would that
Uh-huh.
technically be kind of like the technology part of it, like how like it's changing that idea?
Yeah, it can. So for one of my research projects right now, I'm working on building a 3D photorealistic interactive, basically like Google Earth, with mountains and valleys,
Yeah.
and you can type in any address or whatever, and zoom right into that spot on the surface of the Earth, and it all sort of looks like it should. Just using satellite imagery right now, but I'm working on getting the plants and trees and stuff in there. And in some ways, that is perfect because it takes the pressure of human presence and the alterations that we tend to put onto our ecosystems out of the equation. Like I can fly through Grand Canyon virtually as much as I want to in the loudest, most disruptive, the dirtiest burning jet that I want to. But my big rig computer is probably burning about a kilowatt per hour to do that. And it's probably not giving me any physiological benefit. Like I'm sitting at
You're
a
still in
computer
your
battle station
room, or you're still in your living room, still
and
walking.
sedentary. Yeah. And breathing kind of
Technically,
dirty indoor air.
technically
Yeah.
you're doing exercise, but you're not getting the full fulfillment of actually going to the trail, hiking,
Right.
seeing actual nature.
Yeah.
It's
My pulse rate
like,
is low. I'm
yeah,
pretty chill. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So it's a trade-off. There are benefits to that and there are drawbacks to that. This summer when we go to Grand Canyon, we're going to see what the trade-offs are when tourists from Las Vegas fly through the canyon in a helicopter that is super loud and kind of dirty burning, and disrupting a bunch of wildlife and kind of an irritant for people hiking through the canyon as well, because the sound just kind of echoes off those walls.
Mhm.
And so in that case, we're going to be at the Grand Canyon and we are getting the benefit of the physical exercise and the social interaction and all of that stuff. But in that case, we are potentially running into the wildlife, and all of that. So that's a whole other rabbit hole we could drop down. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I just want
so
to make sure I was like on the right idea.
virtual nature is, yeah, just in the last decade, virtual nature is a thing, um, for the first time in any meaningful sense whatsoever, with Crisis and the old CryEngine and the Unreal 4 engine and all that. So
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, I'll be curious to see what you turn up. All right.
okay, and you'll put up like the directions on there, because like I can, like from what you said, I can do something, but like I rather have like here, this is like what we're trying to do, and just like go for it, and that's why I was kind of like hoping
Yep.
with the
Yeah,
direction.
I'll get it all written up for you. No big deal.
Thank you so much. See you next time.
Yeah, see you, Raul. Other questions? We got, looks like a couple other people.
Is summer camp, is it the same dates every year? And when is it this year?
It's the same 4 weeks every year. Let me pull up the website
Because
for us here.
I was just wondering
Let's see.
because like I am in the National Guard and we do have like 2 or 3 weeks during the summer. And
Uh-huh.
like I didn't know like how that would interfere. And like this summer I go June 12th to the 26th.
Oh, you're
So
good then. We're done by June 12th. Yeah. Um, Let me pull up the details. But in past years where guard duty has like the 3 or 4 week FTX or whatever you got to do each year, when that has overlap with summer camp, because it's an official and required class that is scheduled in advance and stuff like that, those students are actually able to get an exemption for that duty. And I write a letter to your CO that says, hey, Jordan is not making this up. He's not trying to get out of duty or whatever. This is a real thing. Here's the catalog entry and here's when we'll be back. And that's been fine. The COs have always been very polite and kind of like, thanks, that's all we need. It's good to go. We'll see him next time. All right, so the calendar for summer camp is,
and we just have to do it like any time in our 4 years.
Yeah, yeah. But it sounds like it's separate and done. Yes. Okay. So we're done by Friday, June 4th, and a rec camp will actually be back probably on Wednesday or Thursday. So June 2nd or 3rd. So that gives you a couple of days. Um, really about a week, I guess, to get back, throw your stuff down, shower up about 5 times in a row, catch up on sleep, and then be ready to go for guard if that's what you need to do. Or take it another year. That's fine too. But yeah, we're going out west this year. Should be pretty interesting. So yeah, let me post the calendar link in chat so you can plan, like any other summer stuff that you got going on as well. Let me get that in there.
So like as long as I do the summer thing throughout any of my college, I'm fine.
Yeah, pretty much. It's resource or rec camp is required for any forestry major, and then your specialization helps you pick which one. And yeah, usually the guard, the long 3-week stints are after summer camp is over. So you're probably going to be okay this year and other years as well. But at least we're pretty sure that you're going to be okay for this year. And they may have even posted the calendar for the next couple summers as well. So let me pull that up for you. How do you like it? Is it, yeah. So we got up through summer 2022.
All right. Yeah, I don't really know because this is my first time in my new unit. So like I don't know how they do the whole summer thing, if it is like the same 2 or 3 weeks every summer, if they change it, I don't know. But I know we'll be going
Yeah, summer
to
camp is always starting the Monday immediately following exam week. So whatever that is, that will be the plan for that year for summer camp at least. So you can make plans, I guess a year or two in advance. So there you go.
all right.
Love to have you along this year, or we'll see you in a future year. Either way is good. We got a pretty solid crew of folks going this year. So if that's something you can tag on to, man, love to have you along. It'd be cool.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? How can I help? And if you do have some kind of a conflict coming up, or any class field trips, like my senior classes usually go for a long weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If that happens to overlap, you can always do an alternative field trip, like something else on your own to a separate place. If that meshes better with your guard schedule, the 1 week in a month thing. Or again, those are pre-scheduled, required, official in the syllabus and in the academic catalog things. And we just kind of write you a note and say, hey, this is a thing that Jordan is not really allowed to get out of. Would it be all right if he does this? And again, usually the commanding officers are kind of fine with it. Like, it's not the end of the world. So I don't want you to feel like, your major's putting you in a difficult spot with your commanding officer.
Yeah, and I know like with the unit, like I know like most units, as long as you give them enough time or say, hey, I need to take this, then they do like a split drill or training for you. So, but yeah, I came home and I'll be going back to school tomorrow because I have drill down in Lawrenceville on Saturday. So
Okay. Yeah. All
but
this driving
I
on those
heard the
roads
roads are
being like
pretty
they are.
crappy
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah, they were for a couple of days. Things are kind of fine now. I was out just, doing classes from campus yesterday. It was no big deal. But yeah, for about the first 24 hours earlier this week, it was pretty slick and choppy and snowed in. But that's pretty unusual for down here. So yeah, that was all right.
All right.
All right,
Yeah, I
man.
thought I'd ask about the summer camp.
Yeah, we get this question every year. It's no big deal, truly. So don't feel like you're putting me in an awkward spot or anything with scheduling around that. So I'm happy to work with you. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right, man. See you around.
Yep.